What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about Cha-Ching, The King of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. So, guys, this is book number 2 in the Broken Empire trilogy. And just for those that are wondering, there will be very minor spoilers here. But for those that want a better grasp of the trilogy, go ahead and get comfy because I keep these things fairly vague as far as going into the narrative. And I went pretty far into the narrative in Prince. I am not going to do that here. So like I said, just go ahead and get comfy. This was a reread, also a buddy read with Rosekay Reads. We both blasted through this thing, so we didn't really talk about it a whole lot, except for how much we liked it. But I will put a link in the description for her channel. She's new. Go ahead and check her out. I am always excited to see new readers approaching the Broken Empire, and especially when they find it enjoying as well, as much as I do. So, let's get into it. Now, in King of Thorns, we will follow the onerous Jorg Ankrath and his road brothers once again. But the thing is this is told on multiple timelines, just like Prince of Thorns, but Mark Lawrence delivers King of Thorns in a much different manner. So when we start out, we're at Jorg Ankrath's wedding day, and I'm with you. Where was my invite? Anyway, as the reader coming off of Prince of Thorns, there's a 4-year gap now from Prince of Thorns to Jorg Ankrath's wedding day, which we are picking up with. So there are plenty of things that are starting to get thrown at the reader that don't make much sense yet. Like I said, the story is told on multiple timelines. So we have Jorg's wedding day, which is the current timeline, and that's the one that we're getting hit with first. And that not only shows us that Jorg is getting married, but it also introduces the fact that Jorg's kingdom is under attack. It's basically under siege by the very popular Prince of Arrow, who is a character that we will find out that is just basically being heralded as the guy to sit on the throne and be the new emperor, one to usher in new ways for the Broken Empire. The rest of the story is told through the past, and it's basically chopped up between a timeline that is 4 years in the past, which takes place really only several months after the events of Prince of Thorns, but we're also getting hit with Catherine's diary entries, as well as another little device that Lawrence threw in here known as the memory box. And now this is basically, when we get hit with this, it's like Jorg has something happen to him along the way that he just doesn't want to remember. So he has this memory shoved inside a box. Now throughout the story, the box will kind of open here or there and we get little snippets of this memory. So we are getting, the current timeline, the 4 years previous timeline, Catherine's diaries, and the memory box, which will all come together to really shape this story. Okay, so the first thing I really want to get into is Mark Lawrence's writing, because everybody will notice a huge change from Prince to King. Where Prince was really just like a bullet train jumping from plot point to plot point, this one really is written well. Like, it's constructed to build tension. It's delivered so much more mature, I guess. And that is where I think a lot of people that might have had some complaints with Prince will begin to kind of come around here in King of Thorns. Now, the thing is, Mark Lawrence, in his use of flashbacks, this one in King of Thorns is the best. It's the best that I've ever read. Like I said, it's kind of almost like a Quentin Tarantino-esque feel, because Catherine's diary and the 4-year previous timeline, as well as the memory box, all of those really push the current timeline forward. So I've just never seen anyone utilize flashbacks so well. Normally, I criticize flashbacks, but just like I said, because you're kind of hit with the current state of affairs and you're really coming up with all these questions oh, why is this? What's this? How is this? What? And then all of a sudden he hits you with that previous timeline that really fills in the gaps in a slow way, though, too. He doesn't just give you all the information right away. And this is what helps build tension, though. As you're going through the story, he's giving you the little bit each fucking inch that you crawl. And to some, it might get a little like you're like kind of getting annoyed because you're not getting the answer. But for me personally, this was just genius because it kept me engaged and just wondering all the way from beginning to end. And keeping with Lawrence's writing, I mean, some of this action that he writes, the battles and whatnot, the aftermath of battle is just so dark and delicious. This is some of the best, like, grimdark descriptions. Like, it's very edgy and dark. Of course, we're getting it from Jorg Ancrath, because once again, we're inside his head. But man, Lawrence just has a way of giving the reader just this visceral darkness that can either make your stomach churn, or, you know, for guys like me, it's just like we drink this stuff up like the blood of our enemies. It's just so goddamn good. Next, I want to talk about the characters, because I think that Lawrence really shined with the characters. I really think that Lawrence shined everywhere in this book, but the characters... I mean, the Road Brothers got a lot of love in here, and that is certainly something that someone could complain about in Prince of Thorns, being the not-so-merry band of misfits that is very closely attached to Jorg Ancrath. It just doesn't seem like they were that well fleshed out. But in King of Thorns, we get, they feel very familiar, and they really do feel like brothers by the end of this book. But let's start out with the onerous Jorg Ancrath, because I think it's one thing that the reader will notice right away is that we're getting a much more mature Jorg Ancrath. That doesn't mean that he's a good guy. It just means that, like, some of the childish ways of thinking have gone by the wayside. Certain, just immature shit that he would do, he doesn't do. And he even makes, mental notes of this to play through to the reader. So you kind of are getting this glimpse of a more mature protagonist. But we will also finally get to see Jorg Ancrath kind of struggle with his conscience. We will see him be a much more human character than we have seen him before, especially when he struggles with, kind of like the concept of all the, the havoc that he has wreaked on the Broken Empire, and just, how that, the aftermath of all that, right? Like, his conscience is beginning to weigh heavy on him. Now, like I said earlier, the Road Brothers get a lot of love here in the King of Thorns, which is really good because it doesn't just flesh out these characters, it also begins to add, this level of humanness to Jorg Ancrath, right? Because now it seems like he's caring about other people, besides just himself or, making the Nuban. So, I mean, we get Michael, who makes an appearance here, right? He's a familiar character, and he kind of comes out of nowhere, but boom, we have our idiot back again. And, the little back and forth between Michael and Jorg is kind of endearing, really. We get, young Sim, and this is, just a very sneaky character we come to find out. Not only that, we find that, young Sim is responsible for teaching Jorg, just kind of how to be sneaky and crafty in certain situations. We get Red Kent, we find out that Red Kent is actually quite a pious man during times of peace. But when the war horns start to call, he gets pretty goddamn bloody. Mark Lawrence not only gave the Road Brothers love, but really, all the characters in here got much more shine and, fleshing out for the reader. Catherine, I didn't really mention Catherine at all yet, but because almost in a way, she doesn't really become a character too much to me until this book. And her diary entries really help the reader get a perspective of the Broken Empire that they haven't been able to get before, because we're always seeing things through Jorg's eyes. So it is kind of nice to see, this world just through a fresh pair of eyes. But like I said, Catherine's importance to the story and her relationship between Jorg Ancrath is really enjoyable, because, Catherine has one of those, I think it's like an ambivalent kind of relationship with Jorg. You know what I mean? It's like that love-hate kind of thing. And it's definitely interesting to watch play out. As well as another character that I felt got the best, fleshing out here was Sagus, the Dream Witch. We know of Sagus. We knew that, King Oladan hired him, while Jorg was gone. And when Jorg came back to Tall Castle, that was when he met Sagus. But we really get to find out much more about Sagus in this book, and just really how big of a role He's been playing this whole time. We might not have seen him, but that's the whole point. The other thing that Mark Lawrence really excelled at here in King of Thorns is really opening up like the lore, the magic, the builder technology, because it's kind of sparse in Prince of Thorns, and I'm not saying it's all given to you here in King of Thorns where it's all completely understood. There's still a lot of mysterious like elements to Mark Lawrence's world building all through this trilogy, but here we are getting to understand the people, the shadows behind the thrones. We're getting some names thrown at us more. Just the concept of the world and how the magic is kind of coming to be. How reality is starting to kind of be being bent, so to speak. All this stuff begins to really be fleshed out here in King of Thorns. As much as this is a journey of Jorgs, man, this is really, a journey for the reader into the Broken Empire. Now, as far as my 2 cents for the slow and the struggling, I do not think that Mark Lawrence has thrown too many hurdles at you here, even with the multiple timeline jumps. You might be doing a lot of popping back and forth here throughout the story, but he does a great job of labeling these events. Like, you'll know when you're 4 years in the past, or when you're at the wedding day, or if you're reading an entry from Catherine's diary. And not only that, just even the mystery box. When that thing happens to kind of crack open at times, it's clearly written into the story where you're not just going to be like, oh, what the fuck is going on? Mark Lawrence has given you all the breadcrumbs, all the chalk arrows to guide you through this story. If you find yourself confused, more than likely you just haven't been given the answer yet, so I would just encourage you to keep pushing forward. If it's worth your time, absolutely. If you have started the Broken Empire trilogy and you read Prince of Thorns, you owe it to yourself to read King of Thorns. This, in my opinion, is the best book of the trilogy. It's definitely one of Mark Lawrence's best books, in my opinion. It's a great ride, and it's just great to see a character like Jorg Ancrath mature a little bit. You know what I mean? He's still dark and dastardly, but it's not so much like, it doesn't feel so much like, from a teenage pissed off perspective anymore. It feels like someone that I think that you could get behind, especially if you're somebody that's been bullied or just pushed around and you've had enough, because that's really like Jorg Ancrath kind of signifies that kind of person. It's like, was it Michael Douglas from Falling Down? When you finally snap and you're like, you know what? Ain't nobody ever gonna fucking push me around ever again. So I know I got way off track there, but yes, I do believe that this book is worth your time. All right, guys. As always, thanks for spending some time down here at the channel. And to Mark Lawrence, a gadoosh, 2 thumbs up. Man, this was a reread, but I'm extremely glad that I went tromping through the Broken Empire again, because goddamn, I had a whole lot of fun, and I salute you, sir. Yeah. So guys, hey, I hope you enjoyed this. If you're new, please like and subscribe. It helps me grow the channel. I will have the King of Thorns spoiler video coming up soon. I'm actually going to have to be going on the road to go, do some work and shit, but I will be bringing this whole show with me. So we will be doing the show on the road. But yeah, I know I don't even really need to get into that yet. I'll do an update. All right. You know what time it is. Brr.